Hi, my name is Kristi Lee. I'm the Indigenous Ranger here at Tidbinbilla Nature Reserve for ACT Parks and Conservation. My mob is the Githwal people of the far northern rivers, the New South Wales, Queensland area. I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land in which I work and care for in my role. And I'd also like to acknowledge the knowledge which has been shared with me and that I share with visitors here at Tidbinbilla. So we're currently standing up in the grass trees site here at Tidbinbilla. So this is the Xantheria Loop. So it's one of the walking trails that you can do here at Tidbinbilla. And we're just overlooking Tidbinbilla Valley, which is just behind us here. So it's a beautiful sort of lookout over the valley, and you can kind of, I guess, imagine how the landscape, kind of would have looked and functioned from this sort of eagle eye view. But I also love the setting here because of all the grass trees that are situated here. So there's probably up to easily 100 grass trees at this site where we are. I think the special thing is that, they're not just kind of, I don't think they're just coincidentally sort of here, from, birds or whatever dropping seeds. I think, I feel like, they were put here for a reason. And particularly being the fact that the grass trees themselves are basically like a supermarket, or as I sometimes say, they're a bit like the Bunnings of Tidbinbilla, because you can kind of get all sorts of resources and tools and materials from the grass trees. So here's a nice big flower head that grows out of the grass trees. So these are pretty special because firstly, well, this is a dry one. So the state that it's in now, so this old one, you can actually use these for making fire drills, so to create fire. So I guess they have a really important relationship with fire because they create fire, but they also need fire to be healthy and for these flowers to actually grow out of them as well. So the fire itself, if you put a little bit of fire to the trees, that'll actually trigger these flowers to regenerate. And the flowers themselves, once they've grown out of the top of the grass tree, they'll provide lots of resources for all the birds and insects and even little like mammals as well that like to eat the nectar out of the flowers. But they're also important source of food and medicine for Ngunnawal people. So the nectar itself, you would have used for like a sweetener, making a sweet drink as well. But also these spears too can also be used to make spears. You can see they're beautifully straight and quite light too as well. So they would have been ideal for spear making. These are being used for things like weaving and for making baskets and mats and fishing nets and all those sorts of tools. So we've got some resin here. So that sort of forms in the trunks of the grass trees, which the trunks are actually pretty interesting because they're like bits of leaves that are sort of compacted together. And this resin is really important for it's really good glue, really good super glue. So you would have used this sort of glue for fixing, making tools and fixing the stone heads of tools onto the wooden handles. And it's really strong stuff. So you basically just heat it up on the fire and it becomes soft, and that way you can utilise it in that way. But that's another thing why I guess the fire for the grass trees is really important, because it helps form these sort of clusters of resin in there too, so that way you can utilise that resource. So at this spot here we've got a couple of other special plants that are growing up here at the grass tree site. So another thing I really love about this place is there's so many different bush medicine and food plants up here. So I guess that's another sort of, sign that, this was a place that was really important and has lots of resources for the people that, Ngunnawal people that were using this landscape. We've got this plant here. So this is false sarsaparilla, and or Hardenbergia is its scientific name. So that's this little green leaf plant here. And this is, it has so many different uses again, like sort of like the grass trees. So firstly, the leaves are really good for using in making tea. So you can either use them fresh or dry, and it's quite good for, if you've got chest complaints, or as a sort of like a detox tea, so sort of like, I guess, like a bush green tea, you can kind of use it as. And then at certain times of year, it gets this flower on it as well. So these beautiful purple flowers come out, and that's it's kind of like a seasonal indicator. So it'll come out to signal a particular season on Ngunnawal country, and it also indicates when the Murray cod were in the river as well and ready to be fished. This one next to us is some sort of lamandra or matrush, and so again, this is an important plant for things like for weaving. Obviously, using the actual fronds for weaving baskets and nets and things like that. There's always a couple, when you find a nice bush food plant, there's always a few uses for it. And there's another nice little young grass tree right next to us as well, with these beautiful leaves. There's a couple other plants I wanted to share with you guys. So this is another cool plant that we found up here at the grass tree site. So I guess it's another plant that's kind of part of this little bush supermarket up here. And this plant is called Austral Indigo, and it's essentially a fish poison. So you can use the leaves and basically put it into some water. So you'd crush up the leaves. Once you put it into water, it essentially deoxygenates the water. So any fish that are in that water will, it won't kill them, but it will stun them. And the way that it works is I'm pretty sure it's a cyanide that's in the plant. So it's naturally got that chemical that causes that reaction. And so it takes the oxygen out of the water, and so the fish essentially are stunned. And so because there's no oxygen in the water for them, they float to the surface out of the water. So it's pretty easy fishing. And then the other use for it is it gets these beautiful, I guess, indigo, pinkish kind of flowers, which come out at a certain time of year. And those flowers, you can use them for making dyes, and so for dyeing, weave baskets and those sorts of materials. So we've got a nice little mob of kangaroos, eastern grey kangaroos, behind us here. And here at Tidbinbilla, we've got a lot of eastern grey kangaroos that like to hang out, particularly on the valley floor, so down the lower parts of Tidbinbilla. A few important things about Buru, the kangaroo, for the Ngunnawal people, and here at Tidbinbilla. So obviously, a kangaroo is really sustaining meat. It's actually quite lean and really good protein. And the one thing, I guess, about using animals as resources is to sort of make sure that we're respecting the animals that we use, and ensuring that we don't waste anything. So I guess things like the fur also uses for clothing, and using the sinew as well out of the legs of the kangaroo for making tools and fixing on when you're making spears and things like that. as well as using bones for all different tools as well, like in clothing for sort of like buttons and things like that. So I guess kangaroo is important that way, but also I guess for some it would be a totem as well. They're also a very popular animal for our visitors as well. They love to see kangaroos, particularly international visitors that really love seeing kangaroos, and particularly little joeys and that are in the pouches. So always a popular sight to see here at Tidbinbilla. So we're currently standing in the sanctuary at Tidbinbilla Nature Reserve, and we're right next to this rock here. So it's got a lovely carving that was done by a local Ngunnawal person, and the carvings of a bogong moth. So this little insect actually is really important for the Ngunnawal people. It firstly was a really important food source, and associated with ceremony as well. So they actually migrate down from Queensland, southern Queensland, and move their way down the Great Dividing Range, and follow that sort of pathway up into the mountains. And that's sort of where they will sort of, I guess, congregate around all these rock, sort of in rock crevices up in the mountains, and where they'll estivate. And not only are they really important food source for, say, animals like little pygmy possums that live up in those sort of those high country areas, but also really important food source for the Ngunnawal people. We're currently walking through the sanctuary here at Tidbinbilla, and we've come across this big meat ant nest. And these guys are a great way of knowing, I guess, what the weather is doing, or the change of seasons, or the coming of a new seasonal change. And if you kind of have a look at the moment, by just looking at the materials on their nest, they've got a lot more darker. They're starting to move those darker sort of little pebbles onto the top of their nest. So if you sort of were here, looking at this nest maybe about a month ago, it would have been more white pebbles. And obviously white material reflects the sunlight because of their albedo. If it's really warm time of year, you want to have that white material on there to reflect the sunlight. And then when it's becoming colder, they'll start moving the darker materials, like the little darker pebbles, that they'll go look for and put them onto the nest. And obviously the darker materials will attract that sunlight and keep the nest warm. So they need to keep that at a constant sort of temperature range, so that that there's sort of a nice sort of nest inside, nice temperature inside for the queen and for all the larvae as well, and the eggs. So so they're a great way of a great sort of animal to watch, particularly before it rains, knowing when it's going to rain and things like that. If flooding, all those sorts of things, they'll know those things, and just by watching their behaviour and what they're doing in their environment is a good way to know. Therefore, what I guess what country's doing or is what's about to happen. So we're currently standing, just at the wetlands here in the sanctuary, and probably here we've got a lot of birds around us. So it's water is a really important resource for all sorts of animals. So we've got lots of different animals in the sanctuary here. So obviously, like kangaroos, wallabies. We've got also little bandicoots in here as well. And we do have brush-tail rock wallabies, which are part of a breeding program, threatened species breeding program. So they've been released in here, and you might be able to hear behind us. We've got there's a few birds that are hanging around us. So we've got Ripper, our musk behind me here. You might be able to see or hear him in the water. There he is. Hey, buddy. And he's got a funky little wattle under his chin. And I think that's sort of his way of attracting the ladies. Unfortunately, he's a bit of a bachelor at the moment. So we have George the pelican. He also lives in this little wetland here, and we've got lots of other ducks like wood ducks and Pacific black ducks that like to hang around as well, and swans, black swans too. We've also got turtles. You don't usually see them this time of year. It's starting to get a bit cold for them now, so they'd be estivating under the ground. So they come up onto the banks, and they'll bury themselves under the leaf litter and the ground, and sort of shut themselves off during the cold time of year, and then they'll come back out again in spring. Another really important animal for the Ngunnawal people, and platypus in Ngunnawal language is mulungan. I guess their role is so keeping the aquatic macroinvertebrates, so like the water bugs, in check, and ensuring that their numbers are in balance. And also things like yabbies and those sorts of like aquatic crustaceans, like little freshwater shrimp and those sorts of things. And they're a pretty popular site here at Tidbinbilla. People love to come out and get photos and see the platypus. It's probably one of the only sort of places in Canberra or Ngunnawal country where you're sort of guaranteed to spot a platypus, particularly in the cooler months, like in winter is usually the best time to spot platypus.